Well, good evening, and thank you. Thank you for coming. My name is Lisa Barnaby, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Door County. This forum is for the candidates in contested race for the Door County Sheriff. Those candidates are Patrick McCarty and Tammy Sternard. They will be on the ballot for general elections on Tuesday, November 6th. Thank you all for running for office and for agreeing to take part in this forum. In a few minutes, you'll have the opportunity to introduce yourselves. Voter services is the #1 priority of the League of Women Voters. We encourage people to run for office. We hold forums such as this one to help voters become better informed so they may vote intelligently. As an organization, we never endorse a candidate or party, but we are directly involved in shaping the important issues that keep our community strong. More information about the League can be found in the display table in the hall. The views expressed tonight are those of the candidates, not the League of Women Voters of Door County. And our sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. We encourage voters to be prepared to vote. Voters can check their voters registration status on myvote.com. This step is especially important if you have not voted in the past couple of years. Remember to bring your photo ID when you go to the polls. This candidate form consists of your anonymous written questions and candidate responses. You each should have a card. If you don't, raise your hand and we'll be happy to get you one. We encourage you ask questions about things that concern you, your family, and your community. They must focus on community issues and not personality. Questions must address all candidates. Questions posed to only one candidate will not be used. Questions not understood by the screeners will not be asked. Please use a separate card for each question you ask. As you finish writing your questions, raise your card, and runners will pick them up. If you need more, raise your hand, and a runner will bring you a new card. We would like to acknowledge and thank the many people who have made this forum possible. The Door County staff of the ADRC Community Center, Laddie Chapman for recording, and this will be aired on the League of Women Voters of Door County website, City Cable Channel 988, Sevastopol Channel 986, and the doorbell.net/video. And you can also get schedules for the broadcast at that website as well. The local media for publicity, and the League of Women Voters helpers to implement this forum. In the upcoming election, Sturgeon Bay voters will have an important decision to make regarding their votes. In order to ensure that you have the maximum amount of time to hear from the candidates running to represent you, and they each have a fair and equal chance to answer questions important to the community, we have established a format, time and terms for this forum. All candidates have agreed in advance to these guidelines. They are listed in the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum Guidelines handout. To promote a civil atmosphere in which all candidates can respond to questions effectively, we ask that there are no responses to candidate answers, no comments, no cheers, or jeering or clapping of any form of demonstrations. Please turn off or silence your cell phones as a matter of courtesy. Thank you. And now I will turn the forum over to this evening's moderator, Tim Graul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. This will be a forum, not a debate. And in order that all candidates have equal time to present their positions and fairness for each is observed, the league guidelines will be the format for the evening. All candidates have agreed in advance to the same guidelines. The candidates will introduce themselves in 2-minute opening statements, and then they'll each have 2 minutes to answer each question. Each question will be posed to all candidates. However, a candidate may decline to answer any question. No question will be directed to any one person. The candidates have drawn straws to determine who will speak first. However, the order of speaking will be alternated so that each candidate will have a chance to be the first one to answer a question. Only written questions will be accepted. League member screeners will review the questions in order to eliminate redundancies and inappropriate questions. If the screeners do not understand the question, it will not be asked. Questions will be asked as they are written. All questions will be made available after the forum to the candidates. The candidates, league timekeepers, will signal when you have 30 seconds remaining for your response, and again when it's time to stop. We ask that you be prepared to stop when signaled to do so. No flash cameras, motor-driven cameras, or other visual or sound recording devices are allowed. Don't use those during the forum, other than the press or the media or the forum sponsor. Candidates are not allowed to use video or audio from the forum or in or for any commercial advertising. We'll ask questions until 7:30 or until we run out of questions, whichever comes first. And then candidates will have 5 minutes to make a closing statement or closing remark or elaborate on any issue. We'll now begin the forum with the candidates making their 2-minute opening remarks. And Pat McCarty drew the long straw, so he will have the first opening statement. It's all yours.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming here tonight. My name is Pat McCarty. I'm a lifelong Door County resident. In fact, my great-grandparents immigrated here from Germany back in the 1850s. Like I said, I lived in Sturgeon Bay all my life, graduated from Sturgeon Bay High School, after which I decided to go to college. And while I was at college, I had a decision to make. Is this all that there is for me? And I made a decision to join the military. And it was during my 4 years on active duty that I had the opportunity to see this country from West Point, New York to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And I came to the conclusion that Door County is a great place to live and a great place to raise a family. And that's why I returned here. In 1994, I had the opportunity to join the Door County Sheriff's Office, and I've been employed there ever since. During my time at the Sheriff's Office, I've worked as a jailer dispatcher, jailer, patrol deputy, and then the last 4 years as the chief deputy, serving as a second in command under Sheriff Delarwell. I've held a variety of specialty positions, including a state certified instructor in defense tactics, firearms, and vehicle contacts, and I was a member of the SWAT team for 12 years, serving as both the team leader and team commander. And I feel that moving forward, I've had the opportunity to be the second in command for the last 4 years, and this is a natural progression for me to move on to be sheriff. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and again, thank you for attending this evening, and the League of Women Voters and the ADRC for hosting the event. I was born and raised in the southern part of the county. I graduated from Southern Door. I also attended NWTC and got my associate's degree in criminal justice. One of my biggest accomplishments in life, I'm proud mother of 4 amazing children. Our 3 youngest, they attend Southern Door School. Our oldest son, he just finished his service in the United States Marines, and he is now attending UW Milwaukee and studying engineering. I've always been proud to say I was a member of the Sheriff's Office. I began my career 25 years ago in the Sheriff's Office as a reserve deputy. Through the years, being promoted up through the ranks in the leadership has allowed me a unique opportunity that many don't have. I have been able to learn and grow at each level. And at each level of leadership in our department, you learn different things. You have different responsibilities. And I think it's important that people understand that the sheriff's office consists of 5 divisions, and not one is any more important than the other. We need them all to be successful. And I think a successful sheriff has to have the administrative experience to effectively run the department. The people that do the job every day, they do the job. You know, it's the job of the sheriff to oversee and direct and provide people with the tools and the training that they need to provide a safe community. And it is important that people understand it's more than just hitting the streets and arresting people. It's a very complex department. It's a large department. We have a large operating budget. And it's really similar to a CEO of a company. The CEO of a company does not necessarily do the day-to-day or knows how to do the surgery or make the thing in the factory, but what they do know is how to administrate a department and how to lead people. And that's what I bring to the table as a sheriff. Again, over half of my career has been in a leadership role. Thank you.
All right, the first question will be for candidate Sternard. What characteristic assets would you bring to the sheriff's position? For example, honesty, open-mindedness, and fairness.
Oh, I think for me, most people know that I'm very fair, honest, and if I commit to doing something, I'm going to do it. I don't like to pigeonhole myself into one particular leadership style or characteristic. I think over my years of leadership, I've learned that it has to be dynamic, and it really needs to be something that, depending on what you're dealing with or who you're leading, you have to be able to adjust to that, and so people are able to be responsive to you and understand what it is that you're saying and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But first and foremost, I think in a sheriff, someone needs to have a strong character, and I've proven that not only in my department but in our community. And being engaged is important, I think.
Mr. McCarty?
I think one of the characteristics that I bring is a team approach. One of the things that I had to set aside and step down from is coaching football. I was a football coach for 24 years, and that kind of team mentality and team approach is something that I'm comfortable with and something that our deputies are comfortable with. But at the end of the day, one of the responsibilities of a sheriff is the ability to make decisions. And I think that I have a vast variety of experience both in the jail division and patrol division to make tough decisions. Last weekend, I received a phone call 12:30 at night from one of our deputies. And he told me there was a fatal car accident and that a number of deputies were going to be tied up there. And then he told me there was also another car accident and a domestic dispute in the southern part of our county. And this deputy, who was one of our supervisors, was extremely frustrated because he simply didn't have the resources available to handle all the situations that he was facing at that time. So I took it upon myself. I told him, Mike, you just worry about the accident you're at. And I started making some phone calls and got him the resources that he needed. And then I responded to the scene myself and assisted him. And one of the things for our deputies at these scenes, these difficult scenes, they're emotionally involved. So one of the things as a sheriff you need to do, coming in kind of the second wave, you provide some stability and some calmness to that situation. And you need to be able to assess what's going on and make decisions and kind of remove the emotion from it. Thank you.
Okay. Now, this question would go to candidate McCarty. Having sought an accepted nomination from a political party, does that speak to your candidacy and your policies if elected?
One of the things that I've never really understood, but I'm a history buff, so I understand that all the way back to the origins of our state is that county offices have been partisan by nature. As a sheriff, or even as a deputy, I've never asked somebody their political affiliation. they call and need assistance, you respond to it. So I don't believe that my affiliation with the Republican Party would have any bearing on my ability to serve all of the citizens of Door County.
Ms. Sternard?
I agree with a lot of what Pat said. I believe the office of the sheriff should not be partisan. At the end of the day, the law is the law. So whoever the sheriff is, whether you're Republican or Democrat, your personal beliefs, can't play a role in how you're going to handle a particular situation. Your personal beliefs and what party you line up with, that's the beautiful part of our country. We have a free country. We can believe what we want. What we're talking about here is the office of the sheriff. And again, I do not believe it should be partisan. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, if you take that oath, you're going to uphold the law, you're going to follow the rules, and you're going to lead by example. So that's my take on Republican versus Democrat.
Thank you. Next question, we go to candidate Sternard. During your tenure in the Sheriff's Department, what one experience impacted how you relate to people that you encounter in your current job? Would you like me to say that again?
Please do.
During your tenure in the Sheriff's Department, what one experience impacted how you relate to people that you encounter in your current job?
That's a good question. I have spent the majority of my career in the correctional division, so I think the one incident that comes to mind that has impacted probably like my vision for the future and some of the things that I currently do is we had a young man come into our facility, and I knew him because he attended school with my son. And I knew that he didn't have the best upbringing, and to be perfect, he was written off by many people. I had took the time, we had a GED program we had just started up, and I took the time to go talk to him. And, I knew there was something that he wanted to gain by being there. So I talked to him or convinced him to participate in the GED program. And to this day, he still has received the highest math score of anybody that has taken the GED. So for me, that impacts what I do in the jail, and then also what I'd like to do in the community is, take some time and work on prevention and work on things that are going to make our community better as a whole. People do make mistakes. They get arrested, they come to jail, but it's what you do with that time that matters. So I think that has pretty much affected how I deal with people on a day-to-day basis. Is I try to look at each person as an individual, not judge what they've done, but look at them more for a perspective of what we can do to make it better moving forward.
Deputy McCarty?
I don't think there's any one situation that I can recall that really struck out. You have to remember that as a deputy sheriff, we end up dealing with people during their worst days. They don't call 911 and call for law enforcement when they're having a good day. It's all ultimately at a time that a tragedy is going on, or they're in some type of turmoil, or they're in some type of crisis. And the one thing that I've learned in dealing with people is you have to deal with them with respect and dignity and compassion while still maintaining your responsibilities as a deputy sheriff and upholding the law.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. McCarty, what do you think the top 3 issues are facing law enforcement today?
For me, the top 3 issues are school safety, our opiate crisis, and one thing that's unique maybe to Door County and Wisconsin is the financial constraints that the county government is under. In the aftermath of the Parkland shooting, our state legislator took a very proactive approach and made $120 million available for our school districts to improve security. But that's only part of it. Another part of it is we have to assess these threats and identify these threats. We have to have open lines of communication for students to come forward when they see something. I've had the opportunity to read a number of the after-action reports from these school shootings. In a number of instances, the shooter came forward with information, but for whatever reason, the person that they confided in didn't bring it forward. So we have to keep those lines of communication open. In the opiate crisis, we need to take a multi-pronged approach. It's simply not a situation that we can arrest ourselves out of. So we have to have prevention, apprehension, and then treatment, as well as education. And then the financial constraints, our county is up against the levy limit right now, so we simply can't throw more money at a lot of problems because the county doesn't have the money that's available. So we have to be wise with where we spend our money and what we spend our monies on.
Deputy Sternard?
My three big issues that I feel are facing our county as well is school safety and the drug addiction issues and also recidivism. My viewpoints on school safety, I do have a unique perspective. I'm a parent, I'm a school board president, and I'm a law enforcement officer. I feel strongly that we do need to invest in getting officers in those schools on a regular basis. I know that might be an area that we disagree on, but I do have a plan that we would be able to successfully do that without increasing the budget. And it's not necessarily for the reasons people think. It's not necessarily just to have someone with a firearm in the school. It's about building relationships and looking at these young people and finding out ways to help them resolve issues before they become issues that end them up in the criminal justice system. In regards to, the addiction issues and opioid epidemic, we have drug and alcohol addiction issues in our county. We're no different than anyone else. I try to be conscientious about the budget as well. Most people don't realize it, but it costs about double to actually incarcerate than it does to actually treat an addiction issue. So I work hard on programming within the jail, dealing with those. We started Operation Fresh Start, and I also wrote a grant for law enforcement-led diversion, which our county received for $160,000. That will focus on the officers on the street having the ability to determine if an individual would be better suited down the treatment path versus being brought to jail. And again, recidivism, it's a problem everywhere. We just you can't keep building brick and mortar. You have to look at issues. And again, it's about prioritizing the money you do have available to you and spending it appropriately. And prevention, treatment, and enforcement is the way that I would approach that issue.
Thank you. Okay, next question, and since it's Deputy Sternard's turn to answer this one first, what is your feeling on open and concealed carrying of firearms laws?
Well, I was born and raised in a household with hunters, so I'm not anti-firearms. I do believe people have a right to bear arms, and the law is established the way that it is. Again, as the sheriff, you uphold the law, and as long as people are responsible gun owners, I don't really have a major issue with it. To my knowledge, we've not had any issues in our county with it, to my knowledge. Again, looking at big picture, gun control, gun laws, that's nationwide issue. And really, again, the office of the sheriff, you're there to enforce the current laws, and I would do that with no issue.
Deputy McCarty.
I'm a Second Amendment advocate. I'm a gun owner. I'm a hunter, sportsman. The way the laws are written right now, both in regards to concealed carry and open carry, somebody that goes through the efforts to get a concealed carry permit is not the person that's out committing a crime. So I think that's a responsible gun owner that takes the time and gets the education and takes the responsibility to bear that firearm in a responsible manner. So I don't have any issues with our gun laws the way they are currently written in the state.
Thank you both. The next question says the budget of the Sheriff's Department is over $8 million. What experience do you have in preparing and monitoring a budget the size of the Sheriff's Department? What experience have you had in obtaining and monitoring the use of state and federal grants? Mr. McCarty.
For the last 4 years, I've been the second in command for the Sheriff's Office, and one of my responsibilities has been to craft our budget. That's a team effort involving input from a variety of people within the office, but at the end of the day, I'm the one that puts the budget together and presents it to the sheriff, and then we take it forward to the financial director and to the county administrator. So I have had vast experience doing that, and in all 3 years previous, we've been under budget, and we're currently under budget as we move forward in 2018. With regards to one of the things that we were able to do, we were able to establish a canine program within the county through the establishment of the Door County Crime Prevention Foundation. So that canine, after an absence of 29 years, is back in the county with absolutely no impact on a tax levy. We've also been very aggressive in acquiring excess federal property through programs with over $100,000 of property being brought in at little or no expense to the county taxpayers. We do pursue a variety of grants. One of the grants that we looked at in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting was the cops hiring grant, but unfortunately, the current administration has put that grant on freeze until they figure out some of the immigration laws.
Thank you. Deputy Sternard.
My experience with budgeting, I've been, again, in administration for over a decade, and I run the jail portion of the Sheriff's Department. That I'm very actively involved in that over my 10 years as a lieutenant. We did have a little change in how we do budgeting in our department prior to Sheriff DeLarwell taking over. All 4 administrators sat down and worked together on the budget. That has changed, but I still am responsible ultimately for the jail budget. And the jail actually brings in over 90% of the department's revenue. So I'm very comfortable with revenue, expense, what we can spend, why we can spend it, how we can spend it, presenting to county board on issues that involve the budget. Overall, the budget, a large majority of it is personnel. But again, the jail portion of it, we do have some big expenses, but we do our best to offset that. And I actively, through my career, have went after grants, and we've received them. I just spoke of one earlier. So I'm a firm believer that, yes, you live within your means, but if there's a problem that needs addressing, you can't always use we don't have the money as an excuse not to address it properly. I think you have to be aggressive. You have to go out and see what grants are available, see what community partners would be willing to help you. And at the end, my experience doing that, we can get things done and stay within our budget. And ultimately, the responsibility of the budget is the sheriff, not the lieutenant, not the chief deputy, the sheriff. So if they decide to delegate that responsibility, they can do that. Myself as a sheriff, I think I would take I know I would take a more active approach in crafting the budget and reviewing it and approving the things that need to be done within it.
Thank you. Please respond to whether local law enforcement, specifically sheriffs, should be used to enforce federal immigration law.
Me first?
Sternard, you're first, yes.
Obviously, that's an issue that it doesn't only affect us locally, it's a nationwide issue. And it really comes down to each individual county and the sheriff. Currently, we do honor ICE detainers. We do notify them, and generally speaking, we will hold an individual for up to 48 hours. And again, that is the direction of the sheriff. Again, this is one of those issues that really isn't at the sheriff level. It's a much larger issue, and if you turn on any news channel, you'll see that nobody seems to be able to agree on that. I think it's something that, again, collaboratively you have to work on, and if you're in the position of the sheriff, you kind of have a seat at the table, and I would be very interested in those conversations, and I would participate in those and give my viewpoints on that. Just because somebody isn't documented doesn't make them a criminal, but also in the same sense, we do have laws right now, and those need to be followed, or people need to actively work to change those.
Mr. McCarty.
We have 22 patrol deputies. We receive 16,000 calls per year into our 911 center. Our deputies are stretched to the limits without taking on any additional responsibilities in enforcing federal laws and immigration laws in particular. We simply don't have the resources to take on those responsibilities. With that being said, I would not actively obstruct a federal agency that came up here and asked for our assistance in enforcing those matters, but it's not something that we've taken on or something I foresee us taking on at any time.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, how can law enforcement personnel best be a positive influence in our schools? Mr. McCarty.
Well, like I stated earlier, one of the things I did shortly after being hired as a patrol deputy, or as a deputy, I began coaching football at Sturgeon Bay High School, and I've been involved in sports for the last 24 years. Kind of a vogue term now is community policing. Well, myself and we have a number of other deputies that are involved in a variety of sports, have been doing that for a long time. And I would submit to you that the impact I've had as a coach for that period of time, I've literally affected hundreds of young men and women that had their first police contact, not on a traffic stop or in a park after hours, but with me on a football field. And that's something that I would encourage all our deputies to do is if there's something that you're interested in where you can have an impact on the lives of our youth, to get involved in and serve as a role model and a mentor for our younger people in our community.
Thank you. Lieutenant Sternard.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. How can law enforcement personnel best be a positive influence in our schools?
Well, again, I firmly believe that you need to have school resource officers for that exact purpose. I think that offering mentorship and friendship to these young people is extremely important. I know we've made some improvements. Officers are getting a little bit in the schools more, but, you know, in talking to educators and stuff, that doesn't really seem to be enough. My approach on dealing with youth is, you know, you want to encourage the young officers to understand the importance of law enforcement being community orientated. I don't know, something like 15 years ago, you know, I went to the sheriff at the time and talked to him about starting a Shop with a Cop program. And the idea behind a program like that was not, you know, to benefit us as the officers, but to benefit the young people in our community. And those individuals that participate in that program, they're very grateful. And I still have people from 10 years ago that at Christmas time send me a card. So getting involved in things, and not necessarily only involved because you're getting paid to do it, but because you understand that law enforcement needs to be community first. Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we do Bigs and Badges program. A couple officers, myself and the sheriff, participate in that out at Southern Door and then at Sturgeon Bay. That's an amazing opportunity for people to get involved. We're fortunate enough that we have those relationships with the schools. But for me, I always talk to people, especially younger people in our department, and try to emphasize you need to become part of the community. And part of the community is addressing the youth. Find a way. I'm open to ideas. You want to fish with a cop program? Bring it to me. We'll do it. It's all about interacting, but I think it's important that you find the balance between it's not an obligation for your job, and it's also not just something you do on your own. It's a combination combining those things and building those relationships because they will matter.
Thank you both. The next question is, how are you going to ensure that your deputies are prepared to adequately recognize and deal with an individual with mental health issues? Lieutenant Sternard, you're next.
Well, my approach on that, again, I run the jail side of the department. All of my officers are mandated to attend CIP training generally within their first year of employment. And what that does is that's a program specifically for correctional and emergency response individuals. And that gives them that basic training on how to identify and deal with people that have mental health issues. I think we're probably one of the only jails in the state that actually make that part of their initial training program. But individuals that suffer from mental health issues and their loved ones, they understand and they appreciate us kind of just taking that extra time and looking at it from a perspective so we know how to deal with them. On the patrol side, they have CIT officers, and we do have some in our department. I guess if I was the sheriff, I would advocate to get more of them and to be more actively training, not just the deputies, but the other emergency response people in the community, to share that knowledge, because mental health issues are on a rise. And if you don't take a proactive approach and educate yourself on how best to deal with those situations can go bad really quick. So, preparing the officers to the best of your ability with their training and scenario-based training, I think, is a good way.
One of the things that we've done over the last 4 years is we've implemented a 16-hour in-house annual training. And part of that training is bringing in our partners from Human Services and having a mental health awareness element to that training. We've also had a number of our patrol deputies trained in crisis intervention and in de-escalation techniques. And the biggest issue is to integrate it into our field training program, so our young officers recognize that this is somebody in kind of a mental health crisis, and that they act accordingly and not escalate things where it becomes a use of force situation. So it's an ongoing thing. Like I said, I'm proud of the fact that we have 16 hours annually for each of our patrol deputies in-house, but it's something that we're going to continue to improve on and continue to send our deputies to formal training.
Thank you. This question will start out responses with Deputy McCarty. What strategies will you implement to reduce illegal drug use in Door County, especially with young people?
The drug problem, we've taken that head on in the last 4 years. And I can recall receiving a phone call from a friend of mine while I was working, and he said, I caught my son smoking marijuana, what are you going to do about it? And I said, and we get that call all the time, but I said, well, is your son going to cooperate? And in this instance, he said yes. And our drug investigators went out and met with that young man, and were able to identify his source, and then we were able to identify the next source, and the next source. And in the span of a year's time, we took down a fairly substantial network that ultimately trickled down into our schools, where like I said, this investigation originated with a high school student. My concern as we move forward with the kind of the conversation of legalization of marijuana is the effect that it's going to have on our high school students. I can see some pros and cons to doing both. My concern is much like alcohol has permeated our schools, that marijuana, if legalized, would also permeate our schools. So we're going to continue to take an aggressive approach and identify these sources. Our drug investigators don't deal with anybody in regards to possession. That's our patrol deputies that do that. Our drug investigators strictly deal with the manufacturing and delivery of illegal drugs, and we just got to continue to give them the resources to do their jobs.
Lieutenant Sternard.
Can you repeat the question?
Certainly. What strategies will you implement to reduce illegal drug use in Door County, especially with young people?
Well, again, we've already started a program called Operation Fresh Start, so that deals with individuals of all ages, but when an individual is incarcerated, we evaluate them for their need, and if they do have a particular drug addiction issue, we get them the treatment and the resources that they need to kind of get past that hump. We have a partnership with Human Services in order to do that. Also, as I spoke of earlier, to deal with the young people, the grant came available for a law enforcement aided diversion, and we did receive that. Our target population is 17 to 30-year-olds. And again, it's catching these individuals early. So when you run into an individual that you can clearly see there's a drug or alcohol issue, you have an option for them. Right now, the officers really don't have a lot of options. With this new program, they will. So the hope with the program, or the goal, is that we end up catching people early and then putting them on the path to treatment and recovery, which then obviously reduces recidivism and so on and so forth. Also, our county as a whole, we're working on a treatment court. I think that that's a strategy that works nationwide. I'm involved with the core team that's working on developing that right now for our county, so I'm very excited about that. Those programs do statistically work, and if we can resolve those issues again early on and keep people out of the justice system, that's a win for everybody. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to just being aware of what's going on in your community, especially with the young people. And I hate to keep saying it, but that contact with law enforcement in a positive manner gives you that ability to start building those relationships, so you start finding out where the problems are and what you need to do to attack the problem head on.
Thank you. Next question. With over 50% of the U.S. prison population being mentally ill, how would you ensure that these individuals get the care that they need in our jail? Candidate Sternard.
Well, obviously I run the jail, so they do get the services that they need. Probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we really started to see an influx of increased mental health issues at intakes. So I worked with some of the community partners, and we kind of started developing a strategy. And one of those, at that time, we only had 24 hours of mental health caseworker in our facility. I went to the board and explained our problem, explained our vision, what we wanted to try to accomplish, and I was allowed to increase our mental health hours to 40 hours a week, which obviously in some weeks that still isn't enough, I'll be honest. The jails have become the mental health hospitals. On any given day, I only have 4 people working, and 1 is locked in a room. So that gives me 3 people to deal with people that have severe mental health problems. The state knows it's a problem. They're not doing enough to change that. But any opportunity that we have to bring in training, to bring in outside resources to help these individuals, again, our community partnership with Human Services, we have through Operation Fresh Start, we have that community connector now. So we're identifying the needs early, and when that individual gets released, the services are going to be there in place and ready to go for those people to hopefully keep them on track. Most of the time, a lot of the times, it's a medication issue, whether they want to take it or not, or whether they can afford it or not. So having that community connection now is really, I think, going to be a good thing. We're starting to collect the data. Data proves your theory. So, a year from now, we'll see. But I've been doing it 25 years, and I can tell you, drug and alcohol addiction issues drive most of criminal behavior that we see individuals ending up being incarcerated. And again, it is cheaper if you look at it from a preventative and treatment aspect versus incarceration.
Deputy McCarty, would you address that?
In 2016, I had the opportunity to attend the Wisconsin Command College, and I was required to do an individual project, and the project I chose was the history of the Sheriff's Office. And I researched the Sheriff's Office in Door County from 1858 to 1970. One of the things I discovered is that even in the earliest reference to the Sheriff's Office, mental illness was an issue. And we, like Tammy stated, have put more hours and more monies into our mental health issues for those in the jail. One of the things that I think we need to do, and it moves beyond law enforcement, is like I mentioned earlier, $120 million has been made available by the state to improve physical security for our schools, but there's also a component of that for mental health. We need to identify these people, and there's a thing called adverse childhood experiences, and identify people with mental health issues early on before they become part of our criminal justice program and before they become incarcerated in our jails. And I think that would go a long ways towards improving our school safety and also with our crime rate, where essentially, like it was mentioned, half of our jail population has some type of mental health issue.
Thank you. The next question, I believe I think I'm going to take the prerogative of saying that the question probably means employees rather than employers, but I'll read it. It says, according to the official directory for the sheriff's office, there are over 80 full-time, part-time, and reserve employees. What experience have you had regarding supervising personnel and dealing with personnel issues? Is that clear, I guess?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that number does fluctuate, somewhere between 80 and 90, depending on how many reserve deputies and how many special deputies. And it's going to go down a little bit because our telecommunicators are being moved into a department of their own. But for the last 4 years, I've overseen, as a second in command, all of the facets of the sheriff's office, our 22 patrol deputies, our 18 full-time security deputies, our 5 investigators, and our 2 other administrators ultimately are part of my supervision. As a patrol deputy, I had the opportunity to be one of our first-line supervisors for 4 years on the midnight shift. And in the absence of the sergeant, I was one that made decisions in regards to that shift and handled calls and dealt with subordinate deputies. So I've had experience at multiple levels dealing with personnel within the department.
Thank you. Lieutenant Sternard, you're next.
In a supervisor, just so people, I guess, understand, and when we say OIC, that's officer in charge. You're not a ranked officer. You're one of the more senior officers on the shift, and if a sergeant isn't there, then you take over and you make decisions for that particular time frame. I started my career, I was an OIC for numerous years. I then was promoted to a sergeant for a couple years. And then also, over the last decade, I've been the lieutenant. So I've actually supervised people at each level. And the one thing I will tell you is you learn so much at each level. So it's important that you kind of work your way through that, because what you're responsible for at each level changes. And right now, as a lieutenant, if it wasn't for my first line supervisors, my jail sergeants and my OICs, they're the ones that make it happen. Yes, ultimately, the administrative team is responsible for them, but they make the day-to-day stuff happen. But as a lieutenant, I've dealt with discipline. I've dealt with, people coming to me with personal issues. I've dealt with department issues. Again, as an administrative team, there's some serious stuff that comes in front of you, and you have to work together. So I've had the opportunity, I think, to learn and grow as a leader, and that's what makes my leadership strong, is because I've been there, done that at each of the levels. Obviously, for me, the only other level is the chief deputy or the sheriff. So I take my responsibilities very seriously, but I always try to learn and grow as a leader. Even though I've done it for a decade, I do try to reach out and learn more things and be collaborative with the people that work with me every day.
Thank you both. Next question. How are you involved in the community? Why is it important, and what community involvement are you most proud of? Lieutenant Sternard.
Oh boy. So I've always been involved in the community. I've coached my children in numerous athletic things, even ones I don't like. But when I first started, I worked under Charlie Brand, and I remember him sitting me down, one of my first days, and he really stressed the importance of being part of the community. So throughout my whole career, both my personal life, my professional life, I'm involved. I volunteer more time than I think my family appreciates. I sit on the advisory committee currently for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I am a big sister to a little in Southern Door. In the community, I am the Southern Door School Board President. What I'm most proud of is, in my community involvement, would probably be establishing the Shop with a Cop program. I don't do I don't do it, and anybody that knows me, I kind of stay in the back that day, because it's not about getting the publicity for being involved. I think either you're a person that is community orientated or you're not, and you have to be multifaceted. Somebody asks for help, I help. That's just who I am. Again, I probably volunteer way more than my family likes, but I do feel that it's important to be, especially as a sheriff, to be involved in your community and volunteer, because you're leading by example. You want your young officers to, start engaging the community. They need to see you engaging the community. And you can't just engage in the things that you enjoy. I mean, I've sold a lot of brats and flipped a lot of burgers that I didn't really want to eat, but at the end of the day, it's for a good cause. And I think when the public sees officers out doing that, it's a good thing, because they see you as a person, not necessarily as the badge. And I can't stress that enough.
Mr. McCarty.
Like I mentioned earlier, for 24 years I was a football coach, but I was also involved in a number of other sports besides that. And it's kind of ironic, I wasn't the greatest athlete in high school, but it's just something I gravitated towards. And I'm proud of the number of people that I've impacted during my time coaching, more so than any success that we had on the field. It was the opportunity to watch young men overcome adversity and grow and work together for a collective effort is the part that I enjoyed. And it's kind of ironic, one of the seniors that just graduated this last year was actually a second generation of me coaching. So I've got to coach a father and a son. So it makes me feel like I'm getting a little bit old. But like I said, I'm proud of my involvement, and that's something that I had to set aside this year in order to pursue this opportunity to run for sheriff. But it's something that I anticipate after a one-year hiatus to get back involved in, just because of the impact you can have on young people.
Thank you both. Your next question, going back to Deputy McCarty first, how do you feel about alternative sentencing programs?
Alternative sentencing is something that Sheriff DeLarwell has embarked upon a little bit. I think it's ultimately up to the judge. If the judge wants somebody alternatively sentenced, it's the sheriff's responsibility to carry out the order from the court. So I'm going to defer to the judge's decision, who reviews that pre-sentence investigation and makes a determination on what an appropriate sentence is. And I'm going to carry out the order of the judge if I'm elected sheriff.
Lieutenant Sternard.
I think in our county, we are starting to see a little more alternative sentencing coming out. Over the last couple of years, we've started using electronic monitoring more often under the direction of Sheriff DeLarwell. So far, it's been a really good thing. We evaluate each individual and we determine, the risk level using a data-driven tool, and if they're appropriate for monitoring in the community, we've been doing that, and again, it's been going very well. I think the one thing that it's actually going to start October 1st is a pretrial release program. What that does is all the individuals that are brought in custody, our jail staff will evaluate them with a data-driven tool, and that information will then go up to the district attorney's office, and the district attorney will review that, and then they will make their recommendations, especially for pretrial release. There's other counties that do use pretrial release. Oftentimes, pretrial release programs, they help the individual stay employed. They help the individual stay in their home, stay with their children. And honestly, you're better able to monitor those individuals with the options we have available with this program than you are with somebody just paying a cash bond and going out until their case is concluded. The program will allow for GPS monitoring. It'll allow for alcohol monitoring, drug monitoring, and again, it's at the directive of the judge. So whatever the judge orders, then we will carry that out. But I think everybody, not only locally but nationwide, you're trying to reduce recidivism. So programs like this for low-risk offenders, I think you're going to see more and more of those.
Thank you. The next question is, both candidates seem to have the same number of years on the department. What have you done that distinguishes each of you over the other? Lieutenant
Me
Sternard,
first?
you're first, I guess.
Yeah, Pat and I, we have the same amount of experience, but our experience is different. And I think what it comes down to is you need to know what the roles and responsibilities of the sheriff are. And that is really to direct those people that work for you in the department, right? So at the end of the day, nobody can stand in front of all of you today and say they're an expert in every area, because if they do, they're not telling you the truth. We have to rely on people within the department that have the unique skill sets. Not everybody gets the same training. Not everybody gets the same opportunity. We have minimal promotion in our department. I mean, we have 5 investigator positions. So just because you don't hold a particular position doesn't mean you don't have knowledge. The key to being, I think, a good sheriff and being effective is having good people around you and having those relationships where you trust one another and you empower your supervisors to do their job. And that's what I've always tried to do as a leader. And I think as the sheriff, you have to admit and say to people, yeah, I don't know everything about everything, but you know what? I know how to get the answer because I've got good people that know those specialty things. Again, there isn't a person in our department that can honestly sit in front of you and say they've experienced everything, they've done everything, they've went to every training possible. Again, for me, it's leadership. It's about leadership. It's about surrounding yourself with good people, supporting your staff, and then at the end of the day, when you need help, reach out because our department is full of expertise and each one is different.
I think one of the things that distinguishes me is my experience, having worked in multiple facets within our department, both in the jail and in 17 years as a patrol deputy before moving on to become the chief deputy. It's during those 17 years that I've had the opportunity to deal with a variety of situations and gain that pool of knowledge and experience and learn from trial and error that would serve me as the sheriff, having to make that decision. Because ultimately it does come down to the sheriff on a lot of times to make a decision. I recall a missing person case where we had a boater go missing about 2 years ago, where we expended a lot of resources and put a lot of people in harm's way looking for this boater. But ultimately it came down to the sheriff having to make a decision that, you know what, the life expectancy of that person has been diminished, and we're putting people in harm's way looking for somebody that's deceased. And you as a sheriff have to be able to make that decision and then go and talk to that family and explain to them why you've made a decision like that. So like I said, I think it's my experience in patrol and then as a chief deputy serving as the second in command that sets me apart.
The next question will start with Deputy McCarty. Collaboration is so important for our community. How have you shown this in your current position, and how do you intend to collaborate as sheriff?
One of the things shortly after the Parkland shooting, we've actually had some school threats here. And one of those threats was at Sebastopol schools. It was a hoax threat, the SHS threat. But we had the opportunity to see firsthand what our response would be. And simply, we don't have the resources, both within the Sheriff's Department or in the Sturgeon Bay Police Department, to handle a situation like that alone. So one of the things we did is establish Rescue Task Force, where we got our personnel from EMS and our local fire departments, both the full-time department in Sturgeon Bay and our volunteer departments involved to take on some of the roles that traditionally would be involved with law enforcement. I had the opportunity to sit down with Jake Erickson from the ADRC on a project that I was working on in regards to dementia. And one of the things Jake and I talked about is how do we get these people with cognitive issues as they advance in age, the resources that they need. And that's one of the things that moving forward, Jake and I are going to sit down together along with Aaron LeClaire, the director of EMS. So when these people have contact with law enforcement or EMS, that we can kind of do that soft referral and get them the resources that they need. And those are just two examples of the collaboration that I've been involved with.
Thank you. Deputy Sternard.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes. Collaboration is so important for our community. How have you shown this in your current position? How do you intend to collaborate as sheriff?
Again, I think collaboration is important, and I think anybody that knows me knows I have a long history of that. Again, being in a supervisor role, you're often the person that's at the table. So your ability to collaborate with people from other departments within the county is important. I've got that experience. It's proven. I've built relationships with many community partners, both in the private sector and the public sector. So I go back to my Operation Fresh Start. You know, it was an idea that I had for years, and somebody, I don't even remember who, asked me to present it at a particular meeting. And I presented my idea, and before I knew it, I had 30 people. I want to help. I want to be involved. You know, so it's about being able to identify needs, identify who needs to come to the table, and then work collaboratively. I do it in my private life. I do it in my professional life. I do it as a school board president. You have to be collaborative, and you have to take that approach, and you have to be willing to listen to everybody. You can't be one-sided. Sometimes people come to the table and they surprise you, you know. I mean, and I've been in meetings where I walked in thinking, yep, this is what I'm doing. And through that collaboration and that open discussion, people have been able to convince me or change my mind on something. So I think just throughout my whole career, it's always been about collaboration. I work in a confined setting. You know, collaborating with your staff, you have to do that. We rely on each other. So collaboration is important. And I think even from the top down, as a sheriff, you can't be afraid to get out there and collaborate with your own staff members and individuals in the community when there's issues that need to be addressed.
Thank you. Next question is, what do you see as the strengths of the department? What do you consider its weaknesses? How would you reshape the department? Lieutenant Sternard, you're up.
I would say the strengths in our department, for sure, are our people. I mean, we have some really good people that work in our department, and I think when you empower them and give them ability to do their job, they do a really good job for us as a community. We live in a very safe community. Yeah, we have issues, but the guys and gals that are out there doing it, the ones in the correctional department, those dispatchers, whatever you do in our department, it doesn't matter because we all come together. So for me, I think just trying to encourage better communication within the department. If I am elected, one thing that I will put back in place is actual administrative meetings. We did go away from that, and I think that's been a detriment to the department. We have first-line supervisors. They meet, which is very important. I think that's extremely important. But I also think you should be bringing in your OICs on your shifts and people that have a little different perspective. And I know organizations have created committees of people of all different experience levels and all different divisions. I think that's important. But again, not having the administrative meetings has been a detriment to the department. There's a lack of communication, and that does need to be resolved. Just because you don't work in a particular division, if you're an administrator and you oversee 30 people, you need to know what goes on. In my prior experience working collaboratively with the other administrators, sometimes the person that doesn't know exactly what you're talking about comes to the table with the best idea and the best solution. So being open and inclusive, and again, administrators need to meet. They need to be aware of what's going on, And then also your first line supervisors, they need to be part of that process as well.
Okay. Deputy McCarty, how would you reply to that?
I think the strength of our department is that we have people that care about the community that they serve in all levels. You see a lot of law enforcement agencies, you go to Green Bay or Milwaukee Metro, their police department is essentially an occupying force. They come in, they work their 8 hours, and then they move out to the suburbs. Our deputies live in the community that they serve, they're involved in the community that they serve, and they're engaged as citizens, and they truly do care about the people that they serve. One of the things that I think we could improve upon is actually reaching out to our individual townships and villages and communities to find out what their concerns are. So if I'm elected sheriff, I would have listening sessions or kind of town hall meetings to meet with the citizens to find out what their concerns are. The person that lives in Sister Bay has a different concern than the person does that lives down in Brussels. We have a diverse community, and we need to engage all members of those communities and make sure that everybody has a voice and that no one is left out.
Thank you. Deputy McCarty, starting the next question, responses to the next question. Describe how you would improve an employee's performance.
The first step in substandard performance is identifying the problem and then sitting that employee down and coaching them. You use discipline as kind of a last means. So a lot of times it may be a communication error. So you need to sit down that employee, lay down the expectations, establish a standard, and hold them to that standard. And that's kind of what progressive discipline is all about, where if they're not meeting that standard, then you go the route of discipline. But I think it's a coaching opportunity, and potentially substandard performance by an employee might be a leadership challenge, where we maybe need to look at their immediate supervisor and make sure that the expectations are being conveyed to that employee.
Deputy Sternard, what's your reply to that?
I think, from my experience, when you're dealing with employee issues, a lot of time, there's a lot that goes into an individual when there's a lack of performance. But I think you need to just start with sitting down and openly talking to that person, and to go right to discipline, that doesn't work. In my experience, just sitting down, talking to the person, sometimes it's just a simple misunderstanding of your directive. As Pat said, it's an opportunity to work with that employee, identify the issues that you see are there, and then work with them to develop a plan. And through the leadership, it's our responsibility to make sure people are carrying out their duties the way we expect them to do that. But it's also our responsibility to show them the way if they need help. I know, like in the jail, our new employees, they go through their training program, and we assign a mentor to them. So as they're learning, they have somebody to go to. And I think open communication. If a supervisor can't communicate with the people that work under them, that's a big issue, not only for the supervisor, but, for the line staff. So getting opportunities to have groups of people come together and do things that are fun and make people engage each other outside of the work environment, that's something I'd like to try to do a little bit more, because I think it's important that people identify with their coworkers when they know when somebody's struggling. The coworker does, right? They're with these people more than anybody else. And it's just giving them an opportunity to step up and help that person. And I've always found that discipline isn't really that effective to change behavior. So it's about the plan that you put in place to make that person step up and meet the expectations that you have. And sometimes they just don't. But
Thank you. And leading right into your next question here, what steps or policies would you implement to make the Sheriff's Department more racially, ethnically, and gender diversified?
Me first?
I think you just answered the last one, so
All right.
that gives you the opportunity to reply first on this one.
All right, sounds good. I think obviously the world that we live in is changing every day, and I have no issues with a diverse population. I think it's actually good for a community. As far as training and addressing it with staff, there are training programs that are out there. I would try to approach it more from, trying to identify a couple officers that would be interested in becoming a trainer in that particular area, and then using the train the trainer concept, to send people out for specific training like that can get kind of pricey. So, I know there's people that are interested in that subject matter, and I think there's people that would be willing to step up and possibly become an instructor and be a department mentor for that. The world is changing, and you either change with it or you don't. And I think especially at the sheriff office, we deal with all kinds of people, all kinds of economic backgrounds, ethnicities, gender, race, all of those things. I tell my people, when you're dealing with individuals, you see no color, you see no economic thing. A person is a person, and you treat them with respect while they're in our facility. And that's worked very well for us. We have very minimal problems. But I think you would have to look at what type of programming is available and then figure out if you can finance it and then start moving that forward.
Deputy McCarty, how would you reply to that?
In 2015, one of the things I undertook as chief deputy was rewriting our policy manual. And it was a 2-year endeavor to essentially take a policy manual that was out of date and obsolete and bring it up to what the current standard is. And one of those policies does include profile-based policing to make sure that we're not engaged in any of that. In regards to a diverse work population, we need to ensure that we're casting a wide net when we have opportunities to come available to work at the Sheriff's Department, that there isn't any bias built into how we go about identifying and looking for prospective employees. So we need to cast a wide net to make sure that we're engaging as many people from as many different backgrounds as possible.
Thank you. The next question, which you'll get to answer first, is please give your thoughts on racial profiling and its use in Door County as it pertains to traffic stops.
Like I stated, we have a policy that is against any type of bias-based policing, and I don't believe that race is an issue with regards to our traffic enforcement. I believe violating the traffic laws is what drives our deputies to enforce the traffic laws. So I don't believe that is occurring in Door County, but it is something, as we become more diverse, that potentially could be a problem. And as the sheriff and administrative staff, you need to ensure that there aren't any biases in what your line officers are doing.
Deputy Sternard.
I basically would have to agree with Pat on all he has said. I mean, to my knowledge, we don't really have issues. I think people go and they do their job. And if you deserve to be pulled over for a ticket, you're going to be pulled over for a ticket or a warning or a contact. So I do believe our policy covers that, and employers are aware of the policy. I believe they understand that there's zero tolerance for that at an administrative level. And in the event that we would find out that would be occurring, that would be something myself as a sheriff would take very seriously, and we would have to address. But again, back to the other question, I think if you involve a little more training on that subject matter, you can hopefully prevent any of that from happening in the future.
Thank you. How would you deal with the increased demands put on law enforcement during the summer months? What are the major traffic concerns? Deputy Sternard, you're first on this one.
Well, obviously, if you live in Door County, you know summer is crazy, so the population is higher. I think you really, first of all, would have to study the data and look at the amount of calls, look at your traffic patterns, and do a staffing analysis, to be perfectly honest, to find out how many people our officers you need to cover that amount of area and that call volume. So really it starts with an appropriate review of the data. We do use reserves to do some of the activities in the summer, not the traffic, but they will do traffic control and such. So again, that would be something that a patrol lieutenant, if there's issues with that and there's not enough help, that patrol lieutenant should be coming to the chief deputy and explaining that to the chief deputy and articulating why. And then the chief deputy speaks to the sheriff and they all sit down and talk about it and come up with a plan. And if more staff is needed, then it's needed. But you're going to be able to come to the table and say you've reviewed the data and it's based on this, this, and this. It's not just that, hey, I want another person. I want to increase my staffing, and because obviously the budget is important and we want to maintain that. But it may just simply come down to a shift in priorities during particular times of the year. But without really ever studying the data, that would be how I would approach it if it came on in front of me now.
Deputy McCarty.
One of the things that I would look at, we've recently hired several new reserve deputies, and they're motivated and excited. And one of the things that I would look at moving into next year would be to incorporate their use, very similar to what Sturgeon Bay does with the CSO program, where you use those deputies in our northern villages and communities to take some of the burden off of our patrol officers by handling the kind of routine and nuisance type calls that really doesn't need the intervention of a patrol officer. So that's one of the things I would look at. With regards to the traffic issues, the first thing we look at is, where have we had serious car accidents and fatal car accidents, and what were the factors leading up to those accidents? Are there environmental conditions? Is there something we can do to improve that roadway or improve that intersection to make it safer? Or was it strictly driver error? But those types of things also drive our enforcement effort. If we have a rash of accidents in a certain location, we direct our patrol deputies to increase their enforcement in that area.
Okay, thank you. Deputy McCarty, you get the first answer or first response to this one. Jobs in law enforcement attracts those that should not be employed in that field. What is the screening procedure? Would you suggest changes?
Can you read that one to me one more time?
It says, jobs in law enforcement attracts those that should not be employed in that field. What is the screening procedure? Would you suggest changes?
I think we have a pretty robust screening process. We bring these candidates in. First of all, they have to complete their application correctly. We bring them in for an extensive interview process with the Civil Service Commission, and then we do a very extensive background check. So I think there's maybe some bias written into that question. I think that there are certainly levels where we just don't take anyone off the street. One of the challenges, though, as a law enforcement leader moving forward, is that our younger generation, this isn't an attractive profession for them. When I was hired, it was essentially like winning the lottery. There were 80 other applicants applying for 2 positions, and I was lucky enough to get hired. Where we've seen that reduce over time, where our younger generation doesn't like shift work, doesn't want to work nights, doesn't want to work weekends. So we have to kind of find a way to make this profession exciting and engage our younger people and get a more extensive pool of applicants.
Thank you. Lieutenant.
Again, I'd have to agree with Pat. Our administrative team really kind of works together on the hiring of individuals. The majority of the individuals start in the jail division. Obviously, that's my area, so what that does is that allows us to really get a good idea of who that person is, what they're about, how they communicate with people, and then address issues that possibly didn't come through on an application or, the 15-minute interview that we have. But at the end of the day, I think law enforcement, drawing people to this profession is becoming more and more complicated. Like Pat said, I think when I applied, there was 100 people. I mean, we're lucky if we get 15 now. So we have to start looking at ways to attract different people from different backgrounds to law enforcement. And I think being open to new selection processes. Is there a one-size-fits-all? I don't know. You know, think about yourself when you go for a job interview, right? You're telling people what they want to hear. It's not really until you actually start interacting with the individual. I can say, though, over my career, we've only had a couple that really haven't made it. Usually we'll identify issues or things that need to be addressed and work with that person to make them the officer that we ultimately need them to be.
Okay. Thank you. Next question is, and Deputy Sternard gets the first reply here, how do you feel about the legalization of marijuana?
I get that one a lot. The legalization of marijuana, in my mind, is something that obviously is a nationwide issue. Each individual sitting in this room probably has a different perspective on legalizing marijuana or not. My personal beliefs have really no room in the sheriff's office. So right now, as a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy, we need to enforce the law. And right now it's illegal. So for people that want to legalize marijuana, I'm not saying I'm for it, I'm not saying I'm against it, but this office isn't the place that's going to make that change, right? So individuals that feel strongly either way, they're going to voice their opinion at levels higher than the sheriff's office. Do some people use marijuana and probably are okay with it? Yeah, probably. But it also is a gateway for other drugs for some individuals. So until it's legal, I would enforce the laws that are in place.
Legalization of marijuana for me, if we decide to move forward in that direction as a state or as a country, I hope we make database decisions. We have a number of states that have made it legal for medical use and a number of others that have made it legal for recreational use. I hope before we just do some type of knee-jerk reaction, we take a look at the data and make database decisions. But as a law enforcement officer, we enforce the laws. We don't write the laws. So the proper venue for the legalization of marijuana would be with the legislature, not with the sheriff.
Thank you. Deputy McCarty, you get to answer first. How do you propose to address what appears to be a growing vandalism problem in the county?
I think vandalism has been an issue that's kind of ebbed and flowed over my 24 years, where it's an issue that comes and goes. So to say that it's a growing problem, I think it's always been here. It's just a matter of the extent of it. One of the things we do is if we can identify a trend or an area where we're seeing mailbox damage or street signs taken down, we try and focus our patrol in that location. And ultimately, when we resolve one of these cases, very similar to our burglaries, when we clear one, we end up clearing probably 15 or 20 because it's just one or two individuals that are doing it. They're just doing it frequently. So the difficulty is to identify those subjects and apprehend them. But like I said, when we clear a case, we often clear a multitude of cases.
I guess with vandalism, if it is an issue and it's becoming more prevalent, then I guess I would be looking to the patrol lieutenant to start looking into, the patterns and the data, and then be proactive in the areas that this is occurring. But also, I think the public plays a big role in that. I'm a firm believer in, see something, say something. A lot of times when this stuff occurs, there's time before it's actually happening that somebody's in the neighborhood, it's strange, it's odd, but nobody, you kind of think about it, but then you don't want to call. I guess, to me, I think it's a community issue as well, because you guys are out there and about. We only have so many officers on the street. The county's large. So if you see something, say something, because it could potentially stop some of that vandalism from happening. But for the most part, I'm not aware that it's a huge rise in vandalism, but if that is the case, again, When you see it happening, call and we'll send someone.
Thank you. This will be the last question. When the Justice Center was built, renting out bed space to other counties was talked about. Are we currently doing this? And if so, how much revenue is generated annually? Deputy Sternard, you can answer that first.
Yes, we, as part of the transition team, we built a facility that was 143 beds. At that time, our average daily population was about 60. The end goal in building that facility was to try to start generating some revenue. I would say after the first couple of years, once we kind of got used to the new facility, we began renting beds, and we've been doing that ever since. On any given day, we rent probably 12 to 15 beds. We generate nearly $300,000 a year between our sanction program and outside counties. It is a good way to offset the expense. I mean, we have the beds right now. I'm able to manage that population with the staff that I have. We are, though, getting to a tipping point where, you know, if we want to continue to increase bed rentals, we potentially would need more staff to be able to do that. So that'll take, you know, an analyzation of the new sheriff to say, is this a direction he or she wants to go? And if so, we'll have to look at things that go with it. We do generate revenue, like I said, but it also does require more work and more people. So it kind of depends on what your thought is on revenue generation, and then how you're going to use that revenue to what benefit. So yes, we rent beds every day. So
Deputy McCarty.
Currently, we take in about $240,000 in sanctioned inmates from the state of Wisconsin, and another $60,000 from renting beds to other counties. One of the issues that our county board is going to have to face here in the next couple of weeks is whether or not they make the decision to take our jail deputies and move them from protected employees to general employees. The sheriff, Lieutenant Sternard, and I are all opposed to this move because one of the results of it economically, it would save some money, but the result is going to potentially be that it's going to create a lot of turnover in our staff. And the reason we're able to rent beds out currently is because we have an experienced jail staff, people that have chosen to go that path for their career rather than just use it as a stepping stone to patrol. So there is a ripple effect that I'm concerned about that would, if the county board decides to go in that direction, potentially reduce our ability to generate revenue by renting beds out to both the state and other counties.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much for all the responses, thoughtful responses, and especially to the audience for the questions. I don't think we got to quite all of them, but the time is up, as I said. Candidates, you now have 5 minutes each to make a closing remark. And since in the alternating responses regime, then that would put you, Pat, as the first closing response.
Like I said in my opening remarks, it's I believe that my experience in a variety of the divisions in our department is what sets me apart. Both as a patrol deputy, going on routine calls and high-risk calls and handling those calls, to ultimately being the chief deputy, where in the absence of the sheriff, I'm the one that would have to make decisions. And ultimately, a sheriff is a decision maker. You can only deflect and collaborate and defer so many decisions to your subordinates. For the difficult decisions, you're the one that has to stand in front of family members and explain the decisions you've made. You're the one that has to stand in front of the media and explain the decisions you've made. And that's something that the last 4 years I have had experience doing. As a community, I look around Door County, and demographically, we're one of the oldest communities. I see my mother sitting back there in the audience, and I'm glad she's here. Thanks, Mom, for the support. But one of the things that concerns me is that people like my mom that are retired and living on a fixed income, we have to be responsible with our tax dollars because it has an effect on their ability to make ends meet. So we can't just simply say we're going to raise taxes, spend more money, and throw more money at a problem. We have to be good stewards of our tax dollars because, like I said, we have one of the oldest communities in the state of Wisconsin, and we have to look out for our citizens. So one of the things I think I have proven is my ability to spend our tax dollars wisely and not be frivolous with the money from the sheriff's office. And that's one of my concerns and commitments moving forward, is that you entrust me with your tax dollars to protect you. I'm going to make sure that you get what you pay for without overburdening you. Thank you.
I guess I just want to start off by thanking everybody for attending, in case I forget. And if you're like me, sometimes you think after, oh, shoot, I wish I would have asked this. I'll have my information in the back. If there's any other questions that we were not able to answer for you tonight, I'd gladly answer them. I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to as what makes a good sheriff, I'm a firm believer it's two things. It's one's character and one's ability to bring people together. At the end of the day, nobody does it alone. You know, you can sit up here and say, I did this, I did that, I did this. My experience, I doesn't do anything. We gets things accomplished. That's how I approach life. That's how I would approach being the sheriff. I have worked for 25 years. Just because I have not been in a patrol car does not mean I have not made decisions. Our current sheriff will tell you, he knows nothing about the one half of the department. He entrusts me to run that for him. He will tell you that. But somehow, the fact that I haven't driven in a patrol car becomes a big issue, right? I am a certified law enforcement officer. If I wanted to work on patrol, I could have made that choice. Pat said earlier, the things that the people do in the jail, it matters. They want to take our protective status away. We are all a law enforcement family. Dealing with people is dealing with people. Making decisions is making decisions. It has nothing to do with where you physically do it, okay? There's a lot of good people that chose corrections. And I think it's, disrespectful and a slap in the face when people say that people can't do something higher up in the department because they didn't choose the same thing that you have chosen. I stand behind my career. I'm a good person. I will work hard for you. I will listen to you. And I will do the best I can to be the sheriff of this county. And I will work with people, including Pat, including some of these people in the audience. We may not always agree, but I will work with them. I will listen, and we will work together. And I know, because I've worked for 3 sheriffs. I've worked for 3 chief deputies. That's what makes a good sheriff. Somebody that's willing to put themselves out there for the community. Because being a sheriff is not easy. Ask any of them that have done it. They all got gray hair. There's a reason. It's not personal with Pat. Either I'm going to be a lieutenant or Pat's going to be the chief deputy. But I know the last time I ran, that was an issue, and I was not going to let that go this time being unsaid. Because I chose correction doesn't mean that I'm less than. It's all about leadership. It's about bringing people together, and it's about bringing the community together and addressing issues. That's what it's about. Decision making, we all make decisions, and we can't take credit for everything in the department. The people that do the job every day, those are the people that make it happen for you guys in the community. The sheriff just happens to be the person on the top giving that direction. Going into November, I would appreciate your support. I will guarantee you, I'll work hard for you, and I'll work collaboratively with whoever's in place, however it shakes out. When I ran last time, and as I run this time, I look back with no regret. I've got to meet a lot of great people. I've got a lot of positive things changed. I still do not like public speaking, but I'll do it. But at the end of the day, I have respect for Pat, and I believe he has respect for me. Our department will move forward. But I do ask you to consider, what do you want to see in a leader? Who do you want directing the young people coming forward? And that's how you're going to vote, right? So however you vote, I'm fine with it. Just vote. Thank you.
Okay, well, Thank you, candidates. You're invited to stay after the forum to give the public the opportunity to meet and visit with you personally. And audience members and viewers, we hope this forum has been helpful to you as a voter, and we trust that you're better informed to vote intelligently. Thanks to all of you for attending and participating. Thank you, candidates, for being willing to run for office and to serve if elected. And please join me in a round of applause for these candidates. Thank you.